winter in the Blood Iron territory did not just arrive, it conquered. It was a season that stripped the ancient pines bare and turned the earth into iron, unforgiving and hard. For Luna Aeliana, the cold wasn't just outside the thick stone walls of the healing halls, it was seeping into her very marrow. She sat on the edge of the examination slab, a block of cold marble covered in furs. The room smelled of crushed sage, burning tallow, and the distinct, sour scent of anxiety. Her own. Aeliana looked down at her hands. They were trembling. She clasped them together, interlacing her fingers until the knuckles turned white, trying to force stillness into her body. She was the Luna. She was the mother of the pack. She was supposed to be the pillar of strength that the other she-wolves looked to. But in this room, stripped of her ceremonial furs and wearing a simple linen shift, she felt like nothing more than a frightened girl. Chapter 1. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she had mated with Alpha Cade under the blood moon. 3 years of heat cycles that came and went with agonizing regularity. 3 years of hopeful mornings that turned into nights of weeping when the monthly bleed came. In the werewolf world, 3 years without an heir wasn't just a tragedy. It was a political crisis. Across the room, healer Corvin was busy at his workbench. He was a beta male, usually kind, usually chatty. He had been the one to set Aeliana's broken arm when she fell from a horse as a pup. He had been the one to mix her sleeping draughts when the stress of the kingdom kept her awake. But today, healer Corvin was silent. He had his back to her. He was grinding herbs in a mortar, the rhythmic crunch, crunch, crunch echoing in the silence. He was preparing the final truth, and he wouldn't even look at her. "Corvin," Aeliana whispered. Her voice sounded too loud in the stone chamber. She cleared her throat and tried again, injecting the authority of her rank into the tone. "Healer Corvin, please. The suspense is worse than the news. Just tell me." The grinding stopped. Corvin set the pestle down. He didn't turn around immediately. Aeliana watched his shoulders rise and fall in a heavy sigh. When he finally turned, his face was a mask of professional detachment, but his eyes shifted away, unable to meet hers. "Luna," he began, his voice dry as dust. "We have performed the blood rituals 3 times. We have consulted the moon charts. We have done the scrying." "And?" Aeliana leaned forward, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I've been feeling different lately, Corvin. In the mornings there is a nausea. My sense of smell has spiked. Yesterday I could smell the pine sap from the forest while I was sitting in the solar. That's a sign, isn't it? That's a sign of a pup." She was pleading. She knew she was pleading, but she couldn't stop. She needed it to be true. Corvin walked over to her. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand of comfort. He wiped his hands on his apron, staining the fabric with green herb juice. "Those symptoms," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "are a trick of the mind, Aeliana." He dropped her title. He used her name. Aeliana felt the blood drain from her face. "A trick," she repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Your spirit wants a child so desperately that your body is mimicking the signs," Corvin explained. "But the scrying stone is clear. Your womb. It is hostile terrain. The life force does not take root. Even if you were to conceive, which the stars say is impossible, your body would reject the pup within weeks." He took a breath, then delivered the final blow. "You are barren, Aeliana. You will never carry the Alpha's heir. You will never be a mother." The room spun. The stone walls seemed to close in on her, suffocating and dark. Barren. The word echoed in her mind, louder than the howling wind outside. In a pack like Blood Iron, where strength was worshipped and lineage was law, being barren was worse than being weak. It was being useless. No, Aeliana whispered. Tears, hot and fast, spilled over her cheeks. Check again. Cast the runes again, Corvin. You missed something. My wolf. My wolf is crying out for it. She feels it. Your wolf is confused by your grief, Corvin said coldly. There is nothing more I can do. Suddenly, the heavy iron-bound door to the chamber slammed open. It hit the wall with a violence that made Aeliana jump. Alpha Cade stood in the doorway. He was a magnificent specimen of a man, standing 6'5", with hair the color of midnight and eyes like cold, hard flint. He wore a cloak of black bear fur over his leather armor. He filled the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking out the torchlight from the hallway. Usually, seeing him brought Aeliana a sense of safety. Today, the energy rolling off him was pure, unadulterated aggression. And he wasn't alone. Peering out from behind his massive frame was Livia, Aeliana's younger sister. Livia was everything Aeliana was not. Where Aeliana was dark-haired and serious, Livia was golden and vibrant. Where Aeliana was lean and scarred from training, Livia was soft, curvaceous, and untouched. She wore a dress of red velvet that clung to her figure. Cade, Aeliana breathed, sliding off the marble slab. Her legs felt like jelly. She reached out for him, needing his warmth, needing his reassurance. Cade, the healer. He's saying terrible things. Cade didn't step forward to catch her. He stepped back. He looked at her outstretched hand, as if it were covered in filth. His lip curled in a snarl that revealed the tips of his canines. I heard, Cade growled. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. I have been waiting in the hall. I heard every pathetic word. Chapter 2. Aeliana froze. Her hand dropped to her side. You were listening. I needed to know if I was wasting my time, Cade said, walking into the room. He didn't look at Aeliana. He looked at healer Corvin. Is it definitive? Is she broken? It is definitive, Alpha, Corvin said quickly, bowing his head. She is a dead end. Broken, Aeliana whispered. The word shattered her heart. Cade, I am your mate. I am not a tool to be used and discarded. I am your wife. You are a vessel, Cade roared, spinning on her. The sudden violence of his movement made Livia gasp in mock surprise. That is what a Luna is, Aeliana. A vessel for the future of the pack. I am the strongest Alpha in 3 generations. My bloodline must continue. And you? He looked her up and down, his gaze stripping her of every ounce of dignity she had left. For you are a desert. You are empty space. Livia stepped forward then. She walked with a sway in her hips, a confidence that shouldn't have been there in such a tragic moment. She placed a hand on Cade's arm, her fingers stroking the tense muscle of his bicep. Oh, Aeliana, Livia cooed. Her voice was high and sweet, like poisoned honey. Don't cry. It makes you look so ugly. It's not your fault. You were born wrong. Livia, Aeliana warned, a low growl rising in her own throat. Do not speak to me. I'm just trying to help, Livia said, widening her blue eyes innocently. She looked up at Cade. She's delusional, Cade. She told me yesterday she was picking out names for pups. She's losing her mind. I am not, Aeliana shouted. I feel the changes. I know my body. Phantom symptoms, Livia said, repeating the healer's diagnosis with a smirk. You want what I have so badly, you're imagining it. Aeliana paused. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a new, terrifying tension. "What do you have?" Aeliana asked slowly. "What do you mean, Livia?" Livia smiled. It was the smile of the cat that had not only eaten the canary, but had also moved into the canary's cage. She took Cade's hand, Cade's large, rough hand, and placed it deliberately on her own stomach. Cade didn't pull away. His expression softened. The rage in his eyes was replaced by a greedy, possessive pride. He rubbed his thumb over the velvet of Livia's dress, right over her womb. "Tell her," Cade said softly to Livia. Livia looked at Aeliana, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "I'm pregnant, sister. I'm carrying Cade's son." The silence that followed was loud enough to deafen. Aeliana felt like she had been punched in the gut. The air left her lungs. She looked from her husband to her sister. "Pregnant," Aeliana choked out. But you aren't mated. She looked at Cade. "You touched her? You broke our vows?" "I secured my legacy," Cade snapped, stepping between the sisters as if Aeliana were the threat. "I knew you were failing, Aeliana. I smelled the stagnation on you months ago. I could not risk the pack's future on your incompetence. Livia is of your bloodline. She is strong. She is fertile. She has done in 3 weeks what you could not do in 3 years. 3 weeks, Aeliana whispered. The betrayal was a physical pain, a knife twisting in her back. While I was preparing the winter festival, while I was tending to your mother on her deathbed, you were bedding my sister. I was doing my duty as alpha, Cade bellowed, and she was doing her duty as a high-ranking female. Unlike you. I healed your mother, Aeliana screamed, her grief turning into a white-hot rage. I balanced the accounts that you drained with your gambling. I negotiated the peace treaty with the southern packs. I have given everything to this pack. You gave me no sons, Cade's voice was final. He turned to the healer. Corvin, prepare the proclamation. We announce it tonight. Announce what? Aeliana asked, her voice trembling. Cade paused at the door. He looked back over his shoulder. The look he gave her wasn't hate. It was worse. It was indifference. The transition, Cade said. Tonight, at the Solstice Assembly, I will correct my mistake. Wash your face, Aeliana, and wear the white dress. I want you to look dignified when you step down. He walked out. Livia lingered for a second. She leaned in close to Aeliana, her voice a whisper meant only for them. I always told you, Livia hissed, that Mom liked me best. Now the goddess does too. She turned and followed the Alpha, leaving Aeliana alone in the cold, stone room, with nothing but the hum of the magic wards and the shattering of her entire world. Chapter 3. The hours between the diagnosis and the assembly passed in a blur of grey fog. Aeliana moved like a ghost through the castle she had managed for years. She went to her chambers, their chambers. But the heavy oak door was barred. Her key didn't turn. A guard stood outside, a young wolf named Jax, who she had once tutored in strategy. He couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry, Luna, Jax mumbled, staring at his boots. Alpha's orders. He says your things have been moved to the guest wing. The guest wing, Aeliana repeated. I see. She wasn't a wife anymore. She was a guest. Soon she would be less than that. She went to the guest room. On the bed lay the white ceremonial dress. It was the dress she had worn at her mating ceremony. Cade wanted her to wear it while he destroyed her. It was a calculated cruelty. Aeliana stood before the polished bronze mirror. She looked at her reflection. She looked pale, her skin translucent, her dark hair limp, but her eyes were burning. She placed a hand on her stomach again. The flutter was there, faint, almost imperceptible, but real. Thump, 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 thump. 3 distinct rhythms. "You're hiding," she whispered to the life inside her. "You felt his darkness, didn't you? You knew he would reject you if he knew what you were." She realized then that healer Corvin hadn't just made a mistake. He had lied. Livia must have paid him, or Cade had threatened him. They needed her to be barren so they could justify their betrayal. If she walked into that hall and screamed that she was pregnant, Cade would claim the pups were bastards. Or worse, Livia would ensure she had an accident on the stairs. She had to be silent. She had to survive. The bells of the citadel tolled, dong, dong, dong. It was time. Aeliana walked down the grand staircase. The great hall was packed. 500 wolves stood shoulder to shoulder, dressed in their finest furs and leathers. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, wine, and the musk of excited shifters. But as Aeliana appeared at the top of the stairs, the room went silent. She descended slowly, head high, shoulders back. She did not look like a broken woman. She looked like a queen walking to the gallows. The crowd parted for her, creating a wide aisle leading to the dais. She could hear their whispers. "That's her, the empty one." I heard Cade finally had enough. "Look at her. She looks sick." "Livia is glowing, though. Did you see Livia?" Aeliana kept her eyes fixed on the throne. Cade sat there, looking regal in his furs. Livia stood beside him, her hand resting conspicuously on her small baby bump, preening under the adoration of the pack. Aeliana reached the bottom of the steps. She stopped. She didn't bow. "Cade," she said. Her voice was steady, carrying through the silent hall. "You summoned me." Cade stood up. He didn't smile. He looked at the crowd, addressing them, not her. "Brothers and sisters of the Blood Iron," Cade shouted. "We live by the code of the wild, survival of the fittest. The strong lead, and the weak serve." The pack cheered, a low, guttural roar. "For 3 years," Cade continued, gesturing at Aeliana with a dismissive wave of his hand, "I have been patient. I have been kind. I have waited for the moon goddess to bless this union. But the goddess has spoken with silence." He looked down at Aeliana, his eyes flashing red. "Aeliana of House Vance, you have failed in your primary duty. You are barren. You are a dead branch on the family tree. And a dead branch must be pruned before it rots the trunk." Aeliana felt the tears prickling, but she bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. "Don't cry," she told herself. "Don't give them the satisfaction." "What are you saying, Cade?" she asked. "I am saying," Cade stepped down from the dais, looming over her, "that our bond is a shackle on this pack's future." He took a deep breath, and then he shouted the words that every mated wolf feared more than death. "I, Alpha Cade Sterling, reject you, Aeliana, as my mate." The magic hit her instantly. It was a physical blow. Aeliana gasped, clutching her chest. It felt like a hook had been buried in her heart and was being ripped out. The golden bond that connected her soul to his snapped. She fell to her knees, screaming. It was a raw, animal sound of agony. "I reject you as Luna," Cade continued, his voice relentless. "I strip you of your rank. I strip you of your name." Livia stepped forward. She was smiling. She reached out and snatched the silver tiara from Aeliana's head. It tangled in Aeliana's hair, pulling painfully. But Livia yanked it free. "Mine," Livia whispered. Cade turned to the pack. "Behold your new Luna. Livia, Who carries the alpha heir?" The pack erupted in cheers. "Luna, Livia! Luna, Livia!" Aeliana lay on the cold stone floor, the sound of their betrayal deafening her. She was bleeding internally, her soul shredded. But through the pain, she felt the 3 tiny heartbeats in her womb speed up. They were scared. "Get her out of here," Cade ordered the guards. He looked at Aeliana one last time. There was no love left, only cold calculation. "She is bad luck. Take her to the border." "Which border, Alpha?" a guard asked. "The southern border," Cade said. The room gasped. The southern border wasn't just a line on a map. It bordered the obsidian wastes, a volcanic hellscape of ash and fire. "Cade, no," Aeliana whispered, looking up. "That is death. If you are as strong as you claim," Cade sneered, turning his back on her to kiss Livia, "then survive." The guards grabbed her arms. They dragged her backward, her heels scraping across the stone floor she had polished 1,000 times. She watched Livia sit on her throne. She watched Cade laugh. And as the heavy oak doors slammed shut, sealing her out of the only home she had ever known, Aeliana made a vow. "I will survive," she thought, the rage finally overtaking the grief. "And I will bring a storm that will wash you all away." Chapter 4. The southern border was not a line drawn in the sand. It was a scar on the earth. Behind Aeliana lay the snow-covered forests of the blood-iron territory, a land of life, prey, and cold-biting winds. Ahead of her lay the obsidian wastes. It was a landscape that looked like the moon had crashed into the earth and caught fire. The ground was black. Not the rich black of fertile soil, but the glossy, sharp black of volcanic glass. Steam vented from fissures in the rock, hissing like nests of vipers, carrying the stench of sulfur and rotten eggs. The guards didn't cross the line. They shoved Aeliana forward, their hands rough on her shoulders. She stumbled, her bare feet hitting the razor-sharp shale. She cried out as a shard of glass sliced into her heel. "Keep walking, Aeliana," one of the guards called out. He sounded almost apologetic. "Don't look back. The Alpha has ordered archers to patrol the line. If you turn around, we have to shoot." Aeliana didn't turn around. She couldn't. The shame was a heavier weight than the exhaustion. She straightened her spine, ignoring the blood dripping from her foot, and took the first step into hell. For the first hour, adrenaline kept her moving. The heat of the wastes was oppressive. It was a dry, choking heat that sucked the moisture from her skin. Her white ceremonial dress, once a symbol of her purity and status, was now a liability. The heavy fabric dragged on the sharp rocks, tearing at the hem, collecting ash until it was a dirty, ragged grey. By the second hour, the adrenaline faded, replaced by the grim reality of her death march. She had no water, she had no food, and she had no wolf to help her heal the cuts on her feet. Every step was agony. The steam vents obscured her vision, turning the world into a hazy nightmare of grey and black. "Cade," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How could you?" She thought of the nights they had spent together by the great hearth. She thought of the way he used to look at her, as if she were the only star in his sky. Had it all been a lie? Had he been planning this from the moment Livia blossomed into a woman? A wave of dizziness hit her. Aeliana swayed and fell. Her hands landed on a patch of hot rock, blistering her palms. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled and gave way. She lay there, her cheek pressed against the warm, sharp ground. This is it, she thought. This is how the empty Luna dies. Alone. forgotten. She closed her eyes, waiting for the darkness to take her. But the darkness didn't come. Instead, a rhythm started in her body. Thump, 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 thump. It was the heartbeat, the same flutter she had felt in the guest room, but stronger now. It wasn't just a physical sensation. It was a transfer of energy. A golden warmth bloomed in her womb. It spread outward, rushing through her veins like liquid sunlight. It hit her feet, and the stinging pain of the cuts vanished. It hit her hands, and the blisters cooled. Aeliana gasped, her eyes snapping open. She rolled onto her back. Her stomach was glowing. Faintly, visibly, through the dirty fabric of her dress, a soft golden light pulsed in time with the heartbeats. "You," she whispered, placing her hands over the light. "You're doing this." The babies. They weren't just hiding. They were protecting her. They were feeding her their strength. They were alpha primes. No, they were something more. They were ancient. Their magic was sustaining her, knitting her flesh back together, keeping her hydrated, keeping her alive. "I am not alone," Aeliana sobbed, a laugh bubbling up through the tears. "I'm a pack of 4. She sat up. The despair that had crushed her was gone, replaced by a fierce, animalistic drive. She wasn't just surviving for herself anymore. She was surviving for them. She looked at the horizon. Through the shifting steam, she saw something. It wasn't a rock formation. It was structured. Tall black pillars rising into the smoggy sky. A building. "A shelter," she murmured. She forced herself to stand. "Hold on, little ones," she told her stomach. "Mama is going to get us there." Chapter 5. It took another 3 hours to reach the ruins. As Aeliana got closer, she realized this wasn't just a shelter. It was a temple. It was colossal, carved from the same black obsidian that made up the landscape, but polished until it shone like a mirror. Massive statues flanked the entrance, creatures with wings and claws, their mouths open in silent roars. Dragons. The legends said dragons had died out thousands of years ago, before the first wolf ever howled at the moon. Yet here was their shrine, untouched by the ash, standing defiant against the volcanic landscape. Aeliana limped into the vast courtyard. It was warmer here. The ground vibrated with a low subterranean hum. In the center of the courtyard lay a massive pool of water, steaming and clear. Water. Aeliana didn't hesitate. She threw herself at the edge of the pool, cupping the warm water in her hands, drinking greedily. It tasted of minerals and magic. "Who drinks from my well?" The voice didn't come from the air. It exploded inside her head. It was deep, distorted, and so loud it made her teeth ache. Aeliana scrambled back from the water, wiping her mouth. She looked around wildly. "Who's there? Show yourself!" The ground shook. A shadow fell over the courtyard, blotting out the smoky light of the sun. Aeliana looked up and screamed. Perched on top of the highest temple tower was a monster. It was black, darker than the obsidian. Its scales absorbed the light. Its wings were folded against its back. But even folded, they were immense. A tail, thick as a tree trunk and tipped with a bone spike, twitched back and forth. It was a dragon. A living, breathing dragon. The beast leaped from the tower. It didn't fly. It fell with purpose, landing in the courtyard with a crash that knocked Aeliana off her feet. She scrambled backward, her hands scraping the stone, until her back hit a pillar. The dragon lowered its head. Its eyes were the size of shields, burning with the color of molten lava. Smoke drifted from its nostrils, smelling of wood smoke and old blood. It opened its mouth, Rows of teeth, serrated and gleaming, were inches from her face. "A wolf!" the dragon's voice boomed in her mind again. "In my garden! Have you come to steal, little thief?" Aeliana was terrified. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. But beneath the terror, the golden light in her womb flared hotter. Her children were reacting. They weren't scared. They were curious. The dragon sensed it too. It pulled its head back slightly, its nostrils flaring as it inhaled her scent. "You smell wrong," the dragon rumbled. "You smell of wolf, but you smell of storm. You smell of 3 fires burning in one vessel." Aeliana stood up. Her legs shook, but she stood. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. "I am not a thief," she said, her voice small but steady. "I am an exile. My pack threw me away. They threw us away." "US?" The dragon's gaze lowered to her midsection. It stared for a long moment. Then, the most impossible thing happened. The massive, terrifying beast snorted, a puff of grey smoke that enveloped Aeliana, warming her instantly. "Fools!" the dragon said. "They threw away a dynasty." The air around the dragon began to shimmer. The black scales dissolved into mist. The massive form shrank, condensing, shifting. Within seconds, the monster was gone. Standing in its place was a man. He was tall, easily 7 feet, towering over Aeliana. He was naked, but unashamed, his skin pale and shimmering like pearl. He had long silver hair that fell to his waist, and eyes that held the same magma fire as the beast. He waved a hand, and a tunic of a black silk materialized from the smoke, draping over his broad shoulders. He walked toward her. He didn't walk like a wolf, with a predator's stalk. He walked like a god, with absolute assurance that nothing could hurt him. "I am Valarius," he said. His human voice was deep, resonant, like stones grinding together. "I am the last lord of the high skies, and you, little wolf, are very far from home." "I have no home," Aeliana whispered. "Not anymore." Valarius looked at her tattered dress and the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile, but it wasn't cruel. It was a smile of recognition. "Then you shall have this one," Valarius said. "My halls are empty, and I have been waiting 1,000 years for something interesting to happen." He extended a hand. His fingers were long, tipped with nails that looked dangerously like talons. "Come," he said. "You need food, and they—" He nodded at her stomach. "They are hungry." Chapter 6. Time moved differently in the wastes. There were no seasons, only the constant heat of the earth and the grey sky. Aeliana healed. Her body, once fragile, grew strong on the diet Valarius provided, meat from the fire boars he hunted, crystal water from the deep aquifers, and strange glowing fruits that grew in the temple gardens. She wasn't just a guest. She was a student. Valarius was fascinated by her condition. "The magic cloaking them," Valarius said one evening, his hand hovering over her swollen belly. "It is old magic. Wolf magic, yes, but mixed with something elemental. Your bloodline. It remembers things your people have forgotten." "They kick hard," Aeliana groaned, rubbing her back, especially the one on the left. "That is the warrior," Valarius mused. "He is impatient." 7 months after her exile, the time came. It was night. A rare storm was raging over the wastes, lightning striking the obsidian spires. Aeliana lay in the center of the temple's healing chamber, on a bed of furs Valarius had prepared. The pain was unlike anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't just physical tearing, it was a magical expansion. The air in the room was electric, Objects were floating off the tables. "Valarius!" Aeliana screamed, gripping his hand so hard she drew blood. "I can't. It's too much power." "You can," Valarius said, his voice calm, an anchor in the storm. "You are the vessel. You are the portal. Open the door, Aeliana." The first child came with a crack of thunder that shook the temple foundation. It was a boy. He didn't cry. He howled. A tiny, high-pitched wolf howl. Valarius caught him, wrapping him in red silk. "Altair," Aeliana gasped, the name appearing in her mind instantly. 10 minutes later, the second came. The room filled with smoke. The baby's skin was hot to the touch, glowing with a faint red hue before settling into a tan olive tone. "Cassius," Valarius announced, handing the smoking bundle to Aeliana. "He carries the fire." And then, the girl. The pain stopped. The room went silent. The floating objects gently settled back onto the tables. Aeliana felt a wave of pure, cool peace wash over her. The girl slid into the world without a sound. She opened her eyes immediately. They were solid gold. No pupil, no white. Just liquid gold. "Seraphina," Aeliana whispered, weeping as she pulled the third baby against her chest. Valarius stood back, looking at the scene. The Dragon Lord, who had seen empires rise and fall, who had watched the world burn and freeze, looked at the exhausted woman and her 3 strange, powerful children. He knelt. "The Triad is born," Valarius said softly. "The world will never be the same." Aeliana looked down at her children. They were safe. They were strong. And they were hers. "Cade wanted an heir," Aeliana whispered, kissing Altair's forehead. "I gave him an army." Chapter 7. 5 years later. The courtyard of the Dragon Temple echoed with the sounds of battle. "Again!" Aeliana shouted. She wasn't wearing a dress. She was wearing form-fitting leather armor, reinforced with dragon scales. She held a quarterstaff in her hands, spinning it with lethal precision. Facing her was a boy, Altair. He was 5 years old, but he was the size of a 10-year-old. His muscles were dense, his movements fast. He held a smaller staff, his grey eyes locked on his mother. He lunged. Aeliana blocked, sweeping his legs. But Altair didn't fall. He jumped, shifting mid-air. In a flash of grey light, a wolf pup, large and heavily built, landed on the stones, snapping at the staff. "Cheetah!" Cassius yelled from the sidelines. He was sitting on a stone bench, eating a fire apple. Smoke curled from his nostrils as he laughed. "No shifting in weapons training," Seraphina added. She was sitting next to Valarius, braiding the Dragon Lord's long silver hair. Valarius tolerated it with the patience of a saint. Aeliana laughed, dropping the staff and wrestling the wolf pup to the ground. Altair shifted back, giggling. "I got you, Mum. I almost got you." "Almost," Aeliana said, ruffling his hair. "But almost gets you killed in the real world." "We aren't in the real world," Cassius said, jumping down. "We're in the wastes. Nothing comes here." Valarius stood up, gently disengaging from Seraphina's braiding. His face was serious. "That is about to change," he said. He held up a hand. A large black raven descended from the sky, landing on his wrist. It carried a scroll tied with a red ribbon. Aeliana stood up, her playful demeanor vanishing instantly. She recognized the seal on the wax. The wolf and dagger. "Blood iron," she whispered. Valarius untied the scroll. He read it, his golden eyes narrowing. "What does it say?" Aeliana asked, walking over to him. The triplets gathered around her, sensing the shift in her mood. "It is a summons," Valarius said, "to the Grand Alpha Conclave. Cade is making a move. He claims he has united the northern and southern territories. He demands all remaining free packs to come and bend the knee. He wants to be High King, Aeliana said, her voice cold. He claims his son, Jackson, has manifested his wolf early, Valarius read. He calls him the prodigy. Aeliana scoffed. Lies. Jackson is 5, same as them. If he has shifted, it's because they forced it with potions. She looked at her children. Altair, who shifted as easily as breathing. Cassius, who could heat his skin until it burned. Seraphina, who could calm a raging storm with a whisper. They don't know, Aeliana said softly. They think I died in the snow. Do we hide? Altair asked, his little fists clenching. Uncle Val says dragons don't hide. No, Aeliana said. She looked at Valarius. The connection between them had grown over the years. It wasn't a mate bond, not yet, but it was a partnership forged in survival and shared purpose. Valarius, Aeliana said, is your armor polished? The Dragon Lord smiled, exposing his sharp teeth. It is always polished, my lady. Good, Aeliana said. She turned to her children. Go, wash up. Put on your ceremonial blacks. Where are we going? Seraphina asked, her golden eyes wide. Aeliana looked towards the north, toward the home that had rejected her. We are going to meet your father, she said, and we are going to take back what is ours. Chapter 8. The Grand Hall of the Western Territories was a monument to excess. It was built of white marble and gold, a stark contrast to the black obsidian of the wastes. Tonight, it was packed with the elite of the wolf world. Alpha Cade sat on the high throne. 5 years had hardened him. His face was lined with the stress of maintaining a lie, but his posture was arrogant. He wore a crown of twisted iron, a symbol of his self-proclaimed title. High King. Beside him sat Livia. She was draped in silk and dripping with rubies, but she looked tired. Her eyes darted around the room, constantly checking for threats. On a velvet cushion at their feet sat Jackson. Jackson was 5 years old, the same age as the Triad, but the difference was heartbreaking. He was small, pale, and wheezing. His eyes were watery. He clutched a toy wolf carved from wood, shrinking away from the noise of the crowd. He looks frail, Alpha Gregor of the River Pack muttered to his beta, keeping his voice low. That is the prodigy. That is the boy Cade claims shifted at birth. Careful, his beta warned. Cade has spies everywhere. If you question the bloodline, you lose your tongue. Cade stood up. The room fell silent. He raised a golden goblet of wine. My brothers, my sisters, Cade bellowed. Welcome to the dawn of a new era. For 5 years, the Blood Iron Pack has led the charge. We have secured the borders. We have crushed the rogues. And tonight, we solidify our legacy. He gestured to Jackson. Livia nudged the boy, and Jackson stood up shakily, waving a small hand at the crowd. My heir, Cade announced. Jackson, the strongest wolf of his generation. There was a polite ripple of applause, but the scent of doubt in the room was pungent. It smelled like sour milk. Everyone knew Jackson was weak. Everyone knew Cade was compensating. Tonight, Cade continued, I demand the oath of fealty from every alpha present. You will bow to my son, and you will bow to me as High King. And if we refuse, a voice called out from the back. It was a young, bold alpha from the mountains. Cade smiled. It was a cruel, practiced smile. Then you are an enemy of the peace, and my enforcers will deal with you. The heavy wooden doors to the hall were barred by Cade's elite guards. It wasn't a request. It was a hostage situation. The tension in the room spiked. I will take the oath, Livia said, standing up, "to show you all how it is done." She knelt before Cade, kissing his signet ring. "Long live the king! Long live the king!" the sycophants in the front row shouted. Cade basked in the adoration. He threw his head back, laughing. "I am untouchable. I have conquered nature itself. Nothing can challenge me." As if the universe accepted the challenge, the torches in the massive chandeliers flickered. The air pressure in the room dropped so sharply that several goblets shattered on the tables. Boom! A sound like distant thunder rolled over the castle. But the sky had been clear moments ago. Boom! Closer this time. The marble floor vibrated. "What is that?" Livia whispered, gripping Cade's arm. "Thunder?" "It's rhythmic," Alpha Gregor said, looking up toward the high, vaulted ceiling. "Like wings." Chapter 9. The stained glass dome in the center of the ceiling depicted the moon goddess. One moment it was beautiful. The next, it exploded. It wasn't a crack. It was a detonation. Shards of colored glass rained down like lethal confetti, sending the gathered alphas scrambling for cover under the tables. Through the hole in the roof, the night sky was visible, and blocking the moon was a shadow so large it defied logic. Roar. The sound wasn't a wolf's howl. It was a primal, prehistoric roar that shook the very foundations of the castle. It was the sound of a predator that ate wolves for snacks. Valarius descended. He didn't glide, he crashed. He landed in the center of the great hall, crushing the long banquet table into splinters. The force of his landing sent a shock wave that knocked the front row of guards onto their backs. He was in his full dragon form, a nightmare of black scales, spikes, and smoke. He folded his massive wings, tucking them tight against his body, and let out a hiss of steam that smelled of sulfur. "Dragon!" someone screamed. "It's a dragon! Kill it!" Cade shrieked, jumping back behind his throne. "Guards, fire!" The archers on the balcony loosed their arrows. The steel tips bounced off Valarius's scales like pebbles hitting iron. Valarius turned his massive head and snapped his jaws at the balcony. He didn't breathe fire. He just exhaled a wave of heat so intense the archers dropped their bows and fled. The hall was chaos, but in the center of the storm, the dragon lowered its left wing to the floor, forming a ramp. And then she stepped into the light. Aeliana. She didn't look like the woman who had left 5 years ago. She wore armor made of black dragon steel, fitted to her form. A cloak of white winter fur hung from her shoulders, pinned with a brooch that looked like a dragon's eye. Her hair was braided back, revealing a face that was harder, sharper, and strikingly beautiful. She didn't rush. She walked down the wing of the dragon with the casual grace of a woman walking down her own staircase. Flanking her were the children, Altair, Cassius, and Seraphina. They wore miniature versions of her armor. They didn't look scared. They looked bored. Aeliana stepped onto the marble floor. The crowd parted, pressing themselves against the walls, terrified of the dragon, but mesmerized by the woman. She walked straight toward the dais. She stopped 10 feet from Cade. "Hello, husband," Aeliana said. Her voice wasn't shouted, but Valarius, using a bit of dragon magic, amplified it so it echoed in every corner of the hall. Cade peeked out from behind the throne. His face was a mask of disbelief. He blinked as if trying to clear a hallucination. "Aeliana," he croaked. You're dead. I sent you to the wastes. Nothing survives the wastes." "I didn't just survive, Cade," Aeliana said, a cold smile touching her lips. "I thrived." Livia stood up. her hands trembling. "It's a trick! It's a glamour! That's a witch!" "I am no witch, sister," Aeliana said. She looked at Livia, taking in the jewels, the silk, the fear. "I am the woman you betrayed. I am the mother you tried to murder." Chapter 10. At the mention of the word mother, Cade's eyes darted to the 3 children standing beside Aeliana. He looked at Altair, who stood with his arms crossed, his chin jutted out in a gesture that was a perfect mirror of Cade's own. He looked at Cassius, whose hands were glowing with a faint, reddish heat. He looked at Seraphina, whose golden eyes were assessing the room with terrifying intelligence. "Who?" Cade stepped out from behind the throne, drawn by the pull of the blood. "Who are they?" Aeliana placed a hand on Altair's shoulder. "Introduce yourselves." Altair stepped forward. He didn't bow. "I am Altair," he said, his voice clear and strong. "First of the Triad." Cassius stepped up. "I am Cassius, second of the Triad." Seraphina smiled. It was a sweet, terrifying smile. "And I am Seraphina. And that," she pointed a small finger at the throne, "is our chair." Cade stumbled down the steps of the dais. He ignored the dragon. He ignored the guards. He stared at the children. He could smell it now. The scent of his own bloodline, mixed with the ancient scent of the first wolves. It was potent. It was overwhelming. "3, Cade whispered. "Triplets, you were pregnant. That day in the healing chamber." "I was," Aeliana said coldly, "but you were too busy looking at Livia to notice." "They are Alpha Primes," Cade breathed, his greed overriding his shock. He looked back at Jackson, his sickly son, and then at these 3 powerhouses. "My God! They are magnificent!" He reached out a hand toward Altair. "Come to me. Come to your father." Thud. The ground shook as Valarius shifted. The black smoke swirled and condensed, revealing the towering figure of the Dragon Lord in his human form. He stepped between Cade and the children. He was a head taller than Cade, broader, and radiated an ancient heat that made Cade's wolf whimper. "They have a father," Valarius rumbled, "and he is the one who raised them while you were playing king in your castle." Cade looked at Valarius, then at Aeliana, his face twisted in a jealous snarl. You laid with a beast! You polluted my bloodline with a lizard!" "Careful," Valarius warned, his hand resting on the hilt of his bone sword. "I have eaten kings for less." "They are my children!" Cade shouted, turning to the crowd. "You see this? She stole my heirs. She hid them from the pack. This is treason." "Treason?" Aeliana laughed. It was a sharp, biting sound. "You rejected me, Cade. You severed the bond. You declared me barren and threw me away. You have no claim on me, and you have no claim on them." "I have the right of blood," Cade roared. "Jackson is weak. These are the future of Blood Iron. I claim them." He lunged. He didn't go for Aeliana. He went for Seraphina, the smallest, thinking she was the easiest target to grab. "Bad move," Cassius muttered. As Cade reached for the girl, Seraphina didn't flinch. She simply looked up at him, her golden eyes flashing. She opened her mouth. "Kneel." The word hit the room like a physical hammer. It wasn't just a command. It was the voice, the alpha voice of the ancients. Every wolf in the room dropped. Guards dropped their spears. Elders fell off their chairs. Livia collapsed on the dais. Even Cade, an alpha prime in his prime, was forced to his knees, his muscles locked up, betraying him. He slammed into the marble floor, gasping, unable to move. Only Aeliana, Valarius, and the boys remained standing. Seraphina tilted her head, looking at her biological father groveling before her. "Mama said you were loud," she observed. "She didn't say you were obedient." Aeliana walked up to Cade. She looked down at him, savoring the moment. "Look at you," she whispered. "On your knees before the daughter you would have killed." "How?" Cade wheezed, fighting the compulsion. "How does she have the voice? That hasn't been seen in centuries." "Because I am not just a wolf, Cade," Aeliana said, raising her voice so the room could hear. "And neither are they. We survived the wastes. The magic of the earth entered them. They are the true alphas. And you." She leaned in close. "You are just the man who sat in their chair." Chapter 11. The silence in the grand hall was heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of Alpha Cade. He was still on his knees, his muscles locked tight by the ancient command of his 5-year-old daughter. His eyes, wide with panic and rage, darted between Aeliana and the children. Aeliana stepped closer. She didn't look at Cade. She looked past him, scanning the terrified crowd of nobles, warlords, and pack members. She was looking for a specific face. "Healer Corvin," she called out. Her voice was calm, but it carried the sharpness of a blade. "I know you are here. I can smell your fear. It smells like rot." There was a rustle in the back of the room near the scullery entrance. A small balding man tried to shrink behind a stone pillar. "Bring him to me," Aeliana ordered. Valarius didn't need to move. He simply looked at the crowd. 2 burly wolves from a neighboring clan, eager to curry favor with the woman who rode a dragon, grabbed the healer. They dragged him kicking and screaming to the foot of the dais. Corvin was thrown to the floor next to Cade. He looked up, his robes stained with wine, sweat pouring down his face. "Luna Aeliana," he squeaked, clutching his satchel. "Please, I was just following orders." "Whose orders?" Aeliana asked. She crouched down so she was eye level with him. 5 years ago, you told me my womb was cursed. You told me it was hostile terrain. You told my husband I was a dead end." I, Corvin stammered. "Tell the truth," Aeliana said. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Smoke curled from her fingers. A tiny fraction of the dragonfire she had learned to channel singed his tunic. "Or I will let Cassius sneeze on you." Cassius, the boy with the fire magic, grinned and took a deep breath, sparks dancing between his teeth. "No! No!" Corvin shrieked. He pointed a shaking finger at the throne, at the woman sitting frozen in her jewels. "It was her! It was Livia!" The pack gasped. Every head turned to Livia. "Liar!" Livia screamed, standing up, her silk dress rustling. "He's lying to save his skin! I am the Luna! I gave this pack an heir!" "You gave them a lie," Corvin sobbed. "She paid me, Aeliana. 50,000 gold pieces. She came to me the week before your examination. She told me to forge the scrolls. She told me to say you were barren, so Cade would have an excuse to cast you out." Cade's head snapped toward Livia. The paralysis from Seraphina's command was fading, replaced by a new, cold horror. "You," Cade rasped, his voice sounding like grinding gravel. "You paid him!" "Cade, my love, listen to me," Livia pleaded, her hands fluttering. "I did it for us. I did it because I loved you. She was weak. You needed a strong Luna. You needed me." "And the pregnancy?" Aeliana asked, standing up. "How did you manage to fall pregnant just in time for the solstice, sister?" Corvin buried his face in his hands. She was taking fertility elixirs, forbidden ones, bought from the hedge witches in the dark markets. That's why Jackson is sick. That's why his wolf is weak. The alchemy. It poisoned him in the womb. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. Cade looked at his son, Jackson, who was cowering on the velvet cushion, coughing. The boy wasn't weak by nature. He was weak because his mother had poisoned him to secure a crown. "You poisoned my bloodline," Cade whispered. He stood up, shaking off the last of the command. His eyes were no longer those of a husband. They were the eyes of an executioner. "You ruined my son!" Livia backed away, hitting the stone wall. "I made you king! I did what had to be done!" "You are nothing," Cade snarled. He raised his hand to strike her. "Stop," Aeliana said. Cade froze. He looked at Aeliana, confusion warring with his rage. "She betrayed us! She betrayed me!" "She betrayed me," Aeliana corrected. "You don't get to judge her, Cade. You are just as guilty. You believed her without question. You threw me away without a second thought. You are not the victim here." Chapter 12. Cade looked at Aeliana. He looked at the triplets, strong, glowing, powerful. Then he looked at Valarius, the towering dragon lord who stood like a statue of death beside them. Cade knew he had lost the moral high ground. He knew the pack was turning against him. He could smell their disgust. But Cade was an alpha, and alphas did not surrender. "They are my children," Cade said, his voice trembling with a desperate, manic greed. "Blood does not lie. They are of my line. By the ancient laws of the conclave, the father has rights." "You lost your rights when you sent them to die in the ash of the obsidian wastes," Valarius rumbled. "I challenge," Cade roared. The crowd went dead silent. The challenge. It was the oldest law in the realm, the right of blood. "I challenge for custody," Cade announced, ripping off his ceremonial fur cape. "And I challenge for the high kingship. If I win, the children stay, the dragon dies, and Aeliana returns to her place as my Omega." "And if you lose?" Aeliana asked, her voice cool as winter. "Then my life is yours." Aeliana laughed. She shook her head, looking at him with pity. "You want to fight me, Cade? I trained in the wastes. I wrestle magma bears for exercise." "Not you," Cade sneered. He pointed a finger at Valarius. "Him, the beast you spread your legs for. Let's see if your lizard lover can fight a true wolf." Valarius looked at Aeliana. He raised a silver eyebrow. "Do I have your permission, my lady?" Aeliana smiled. "Try not to make a mess on the rugs, Val." Valarius stepped forward. He didn't take off his bone armor. He didn't stretch. He simply walked to the center of the room. Cade shifted. It was a violent, ugly shift, bones cracking, fur bursting through skin. A massive grey wolf stood in the hall, snarling, foam dripping from its jaws. Cade was big, a prime wolf in his physical peak. He charged. Cade moved fast, a grey blur aiming for Valarius's throat. Valarius didn't shift. He didn't even move his feet. At the last possible second, he raised one hand. He caught the massive wolf by the throat, mid-air. Thud. The impact shook the floor. Valarius held the struggling, thrashing 200-pound wolf in the air with one arm. "Is that it?" Valarius asked calmly. Cade thrashed, claws raking against Valarius's dragonbone armor, leaving useless white scratches. Valarius tightened his grip. "You call yourself a king," Valarius said, his voice dropping to a growl that sounded like stones grinding together. "But you fight like a pup." Valarius slammed Cade into the floor. The marble cracked. Cade yelped, the breath driven out of him. Before Cade could scramble up, Valarius placed a heavy boot on his chest. "Burn," Valarius whispered. He didn't use fire. He used heat. The sole of his boot began to glow orange. Cade howled in agony as the heat seared through his fur and into his skin. It was a controlled, agonizing burn. Cade shifted back to human form, naked, writhing, and weeping on the floor. "I yield!" Cade screamed. "I yield! Take them! Take everything!" Valarius stepped back. He looked at his boot, wiped a speck of ash from the leather, and walked back to Aeliana's side. "He is yours," Valarius said. Chapter 13. Aeliana walked to the center of the room. She stood over Cade. She stood over the man she had once loved, the man she had wanted to build a life with. Now, looking at him, she felt nothing. The hate had burned away, leaving only cold indifference. "There is no yield for traitors," Aeliana said. She looked up at the high elders. This man tried to murder his own kin. He abandoned his mate. He ruled with lies. "What is your judgment, Queen Aeliana?" the head elder asked, bowing low. "The pack is yours." Aeliana turned to Livia. Livia was huddled in the corner, clutching her pearls, her face streaked with mascara. "Livia," Aeliana said, "you wanted to be the only one. You wanted my life. You can have the part of it you gave me." "No," Livia sobbed. "Please, Aeliana. We're sisters." "Guards," Aeliana commanded. "Take her to the southern border. Throw her into the obsidian wastes. Let us see if she can survive 5 years without a dragon to save her." "No!" Livia screamed as 2 guards dragged her away. "Cade, help me!" Cade didn't move. He was staring at the floor. "And you," Aeliana said, looking down at him. "Death is too easy for you, Cade. You love power. You love status. You love being the alpha." She leaned in close. "From this day forth, you are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your name. You are Omega." Cade looked up, horror in his eyes. "Kill me. Just kill me." "No," Aeliana said. "You will serve. You will clean the kennels. You will wash the floors. And you will watch. You will watch my children grow. You will watch them become the rulers you could never be. And every single day you will remember that you threw away a dynasty for dust." She turned to Jackson. The sickly boy was crying silently on the cushion. "What of the boy?" Valarius asked gently. "He is of bad blood." Aeliana walked over to Jackson. She knelt. She wiped the tears from his face. "He is innocent," Aeliana said. "He is a victim of their greed." She picked Jackson up. "He stays. He will be raised with his brothers and sister. He will learn what a real family looks like." Aeliana walked up the steps of the dais. She sat on the obsidian throne. Valarius stood at her right hand. The triplets sat at her feet. She looked out at the sea of wolves. They bowed, all of them, not out of fear, but out of awe. "The Blood Iron Pack is dead," Aeliana announced. "Today, the Dragon Wolf clan rises." Through the shattered roof, the sun began to rise, bathing the hall in golden light. Aeliana closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She wasn't empty anymore. She was full. She was whole. She was the queen. Thank you so much for listening to The Barren Luna's Reckoning. I hope Aeliana's return made you feel every ounce of fire, pain, and triumph. If you loved watching her rise from rejection to unstoppable power, please hit that like button and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of Livia's punishment? Was exile to the obsidian wastes too cruel, or exactly what she deserved? And be honest, who else has fallen for Valarius already? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Ammy Sterling. Remember, your past does not define your power. What you rise into does. See you in the next story. Bye.